All right, awesome. We're live.
Sweet.
How's it going, man?
It's good. I'm in my office. Solid week. A lot of things moving.
Yes, I'm really pumped to do this one with you. While we wait here to get people in, do you want to do a quick introduction about you and Winback?
Yeah. So my name is Dean Ginsberg. I'm the founder of Winback. We reactivate dormant email subscribers for e-commerce brands. We focus on brands doing over 10 mil in annual revenue. And what we do is we combine a deliverability stack that filters out the bad and toxic emails from your list with a hyper-specialized agency to generate incremental lift from the dormant audience. And then we only charge a percentage of the incremental lift we generate from the dead list. So it's almost like, we consider ourselves a recycling center for the life cycles program. So at the end of a subscriber's life, we do our best effort to win them back. And if we do, we usually double their LTV and really set it up as a no-brainer with the performance pricing.
Sick. And we're going to dive deeper into that in a second. I'm Elliot Roazen, Director of Growth at Platter. Platter, for those of you that don't know, we help Shopify brands build profitable storefronts. So our entire product is built on two theses. The first one is that building a world-class storefront shouldn't cost you over $100,000 and take 6+ months to build. We think that that is just an outdated way to look at it. And our second core thesis is the majority of apps and tools in the ecosystem are features and not products. And what I mean by that is, like, you shouldn't be paying a subscription fee for like an upsell or cross-sell tool. You definitely shouldn't be paying like a variable cost. So if a tool is like driving you, X number of dollars, you should probably be paying a fixed cost as opposed to having to scrape like 5-10% of that off of the hard work that you're doing and your brand has driven, not them. So that's us. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. This is going to be very interactive. We'll throw your question up on the screen. We'll answer it live. So participation is a must. Let's kick it off.
Cool.
Cool. So the first thing is, Dean, it'd be awesome if you kind of walk through the problem, paint a picture of how big it is and how painful it is, and then kind of talk through like the opportunity size here for brands.
Yeah. So I ran a consulting firm for 7 years. So we worked with enterprise brands. So we partnered with private equity shops, and the private equity group would buy like a legacy business or they had a portfolio of brands. And we were the operating partner that they put in to transform the business, right? So we were doing everything from like building their e-commerce store, lifecycle program, paid media, arm, like soup to nuts, and knew how to do that in large enterprise businesses. And the place that I really dove deep into was data infrastructure and lifecycle. I didn't love the fact that you can't control your CAC, right? I was like, you can't control your LTV. Ultimately, we're building these businesses to sell. If you can shift the LTV, you can shift the unit economics, and you can pay more for CAC because you get more on the tail end of a customer. And the problems that I was solving in that area were just, for my nerdy brain, those were the more interesting ones. And so I just like kept going deeper and deeper and deeper. And in building out these programs, every now and then I get pulled into a meeting with the CEO who was like, we're not going to hit our revenue targets this month. Why don't we just email everybody on the list? And it is true. If you send more email, you will make more money. And that is like a misconception that a lot of people swaying people away from, to use like better segmentation, better targeting, X, Y, and Z. And it's mostly because sending a bunch of email is like a bad practice, right? Because it hurts your deliverability. We'll go into that further. But it's actually, it's incorrect. Like, you send more email, you make more money, right? Assuming that you're landing in the inbox every time. And the CEO comes in and they're like, we know that if we send a bunch of emails, we will make more money. I need the revenue bump. Why can't we just email everybody? And then the lifecycle team was like, we can't do that. There's this thing called deliverability. We need to be more targeted. We have the people we're trying to hit. And I was always on the lifecycle team's side, right? Trying to make the business case, like to weave the business and compliance and long-term sustainability case to a CEO. And I was very good at making that argument because I also had the buy-in from the board and the private equity groups that own them. And one day I had a CEO who like really pushed me and was like, okay, but explain to me deliverability, like soup to nuts. What happens after I send an email? Like, why can't I do it? Is there a way that we could do it? And he really like ripped into me, and I was like one of the big top experts, right? Like I've worked with the biggest companies. There are a few lifecycle marketers out there that have the pedigree that I have and the reputation that I have. And this was the CEO who's kind of really poking holes into like, there's actually a whole area of email that I am not actually sufficient in. I've been writing it off as like best practices, and this is what people say. But from a first principles perspective, I didn't get it. And then when I zoomed back, I was like, for the enterprise brands that I was working with, it's like 70% of their emails. So when you're talking about like what's the size of the opportunity, you're talking about most of email marketing. And for many brands, email marketing is 20, 30% of their total revenue. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And I knew that the answer wasn't just blindly send emails to these people, right? Obviously, that is not the answer, and that is in no way what I advocate. But I was like, what would be a model of this that is both maximizing for risk and maximizing for revenue? How can we activate a much wider swath of the email list and generate incremental revenue from that? That was like the big aha moment, or not even aha. It was like, this is an interesting space. Let's keep diving in here to see if there's something that we can uncover.
When you're saying 70%, like 70% of people's email lists are inactive?
Yeah, so it depends on how long the brand's been around, right? But at that time, I was working with legacy businesses, some have been around for 100 years, right? And an email has a life cycle, right? They are engaged, and then they stop engaging, and then they sit in the graveyard. So I can just say for I can't name names because we're talking numbers, but like some of the top e-commerce businesses that we now work with on Shopify and Klaviyo, you're talking about over 50% of their total email list is dormant. And that only grows every day that the business is there, because an email has a life cycle and then it dies. And then you either do something to reactivate that, or it sits there and it goes more and more dormant into like, it just sits.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy number to think about, because it probably, like, now it's part of a conversation, right? But like previously, people just kind of ignored the elephant in the room.
Sort of. I mean, like the sad part is people were doing the worst. Most people do what I believe is the worst of both worlds, which is they ignore the elephant in the room until the business case is made that they should email everybody on the list. And they usually don't email everybody, but they usually double the audience that they're targeting. And they do that on Black Friday. So they do that in a period of time when everybody is sending everybody email. They are sending email the most aggressive that they have all year in terms of cadence. And they're emailing a bunch of people who they've just let sit dormant for a long period of time. And they haven't been filtering, checking, or anything. And there's two reasons why that's risky. One is the ISPs are looking for consistency. So when you show a major spike, both in your send volume, but also in your spam complaints, also in your bounce rates, right? Your bounce rates are going to be very high because these are untested emails that have just sat there, and you're going to blast all of them in a single day, and then you're going to reblast them. It's the exact opposite of what the ISP is looking for. So you're getting hit from a deliverability perspective in a multiplier, like the risk multiplies. And then on the revenue side, most brands aren't actually filtering out the dormant audience to see what is the actual revenue that they're producing. What they're doing is they're taking their campaigns and they're just clicking two buttons, which says instead of don't target people who haven't engaged in 90 days or 120 or 180, whatever their typical framework is, they double it or triple it. and then they see their revenue goes up, but it's Black Friday, right? They're setting their biggest sales of the year. They don't really know what revenue and what profit margin was driven from specifically the dormant list, and what the negative impact that is going to have, that sending is going to have on their deliverability and their long-term profitability over time. And so what most brands are doing is like they just ignore it. They're following like best practices, compliance, Klaviyo documentation until Black Friday, and then it's like no rules, hit everybody, hit them hard. We crushed the quarter, amazing. Now next year we have to do the same thing, but even a little bit more aggressive. And it's just not a sound strategy.
I mean, you definitely painted a picture of how big the problem is and twisted the knife there. Before moving on to like some wins, you don't have to name brands exactly, but I want to know like what you guys have managed to do for people. How often do you see that brands just completely nuke their deliverability in Q4?
I think for every brand, right? So this is like one of the misconceptions of deliverability. Most people treat deliverability like a binary. So deliverability is not a problem until it is a problem, right? We don't want to spend money. We don't want to spend time. We'll follow best practices, but like in general, people misconstrue deliverability with getting blocklisted. And blocklisted is like the worst case scenario for deliverability. The reality is I can take pretty much everybody's list, every e-commerce brand's list, and a very small percentage of them are landing in the inbox 100% of the time, right? At most are falling somewhere between 80, 90%, and some are in the 65% and don't even know it. And so they're landing in the inbox also for some ISPs, and they're going 100% to spam for other ISPs, right? So when the issue is that like they're oftentimes not seeing that data, and so the brand will continue sending, but they don't even know like what traps they've fallen into, right? They might see that their revenue goes down, but everybody's like, oh, it's January, revenue's always down. So all of this it becomes very difficult for the brand to measure it, and they don't have the tools to measure it. And so what they end up doing is they're just following what are their consistent business cycles, which have always been rooted in blasting the list during Black Friday and then seeing a drop in revenue in January.
If the analogy, before we move on to this question here, which is a really good one, if the analogy of the binary doesn't hold, what is an analogy that works? It kind of sounds like it's like almost like a per ISP credit score, right? So you can constantly be working on it. You can make decisions that are negative for it. You can make decisions that are good for it, but you should be monitoring that score and optimizing to something higher.
Exactly that. I like to equate it to a credit score, right? You consistently pay your bills on time, you land in the inbox. You consistently late on you're making big charges and you're not paying on time, like you're gonna start getting dinged with a high interest rate, right? And you have one of those for every ISP. I see a question from Alicia, who I think we met when she was at Veronica Beard. And I think she works somewhere else now. So the question is, do you recommend pulsing them here and there throughout the year? The short answer is yes, right? Even if you're not at a baseline, at least what Klaviyo does is they remove hard bounces from your sends. And so you can begin to stress test the list at different times of the year more consistently. And at least then you're having this like very harsh filter applied, but it at least is a filter, and you can bleed that out over time, right? So you might see that what you're trying to avoid is a single day where you're getting this massive spike in hard bounces, massive spike in spam complaints, and massive spike in unsubscribes in the same time that you're massively increasing your send volume. My rec is to just almost like stress test it out and also break it down by smaller segments, right? That's one of the critical factors here is we set these parameters of just like has not engaged in 90 days, for example, right? You know that there are subsegments in there just at a baseline, prospects versus previous customers. The definition of what unengaged that what definition of unengaged that we're applying might be very different, right? So there is risk in emailing anybody who hasn't engaged in over 90 days, but there are also higher levels of reward if you were to re-engage them. You'll have higher click rates, open rates for certain subsegments just by the audience definition. And so you can get a bit more sophisticated in how you're consistently stress testing and expanding the definition of the list, so that come Black Friday, one, those emails are a bit warmed, but also you're not getting this massive spike. The other thing that I'll call out here is like, if you send an email to a subsegment that was previously unengaged and you get them to open that email or click on that email, they are now engaged, right? Like they're going into your abandonment flows. And the goal here that I have for brands is like, going into a holiday period, the question isn't how do I expand the targetable definition, it's how do I expand the targetable audience, right? And so the way to expand the targetable audience safely is to expand the number of engaged users. The only way to do that outside of signing more people up is continually pushing the limits for subsegments and pulling back based off of the engagement that you're getting. And the issue that we have with like just taking one blanket campaign, expanding it out, is you don't even know how those subsegments performed in that campaign send.
That's a really good response. If I was to say like my hierarchy of e-commerce, there's like the advice that everyone kind of internalizes now. I feel like we're talking about deliverability and segmentation and building your list is like, that's one level. But I feel like brands are always like, all right, so what does that mean? And I think like an analogous example in conversion rate optimization is where like you have to constantly be testing and like moving, and people are like, yeah, I get that. I've heard that a million times on Twitter and LinkedIn. But like, what are the actual like mindset systems and principles I have to adopt, and what are the behaviors and let's call them like rituals that I have to put into my calendar to do that? So I think like my first question would be like, what are the pillars of re-engagement that you can share that would help people like think about the problem correctly?
So there's two sides of the equation. One, it's like, how do you know who to target and who is safe to target? And then what is the content that you can send them that is going to show high engagement? And those two layers play off of each other, right? Because there's no real way to game the ISPs. The only way to game them is to send emails that people want. The challenge with this audience is, by definition, they are showing you that they do not want your emails, right? And so you need to like pull yourself back from your existing program and think completely out of the box. You have to change your approach. And there's a few layers to this one. We call them like scroll stoppers for the inbox. We think about things more of like personalized clienteling, something that feels very special, as opposed to like a email billboard, which is likely what they're used to like receiving. So what I'll actually do is I'll do like an audit by segment of like, what are the emails that these people got and did not engage with? What were the subject lines that these people got and did not open? How does that break down by ISP? Are the emails that we're sending even landing in the inbox for that ISP, right? And you can begin to craft a storyline of like, okay, what is the complete opposite of that we could potentially test? And what is the structure that we're going to layer to understand, or what is the structure of that test so that we're actually learning something from it, not necessarily just going for an increase. There's another piece to this, which is, I mean, a very important element to this is like filtering the list, right? So there's a number of just baseline filters out there. There's like that many people know, like email validation tools like Zero Bounce or Kickbox, right? And particularly if you're beginning to dip into the unengaged audience, like it is helpful to leverage a tool like that. There's another tool called Orita, which is like identifying potential bots and duplicates. Like there are these tools that exist out there that are very lightweight that can filter the absolute crap out of your list. But then when you're in that like medium zone, you're dealing more with probabilistic risk, right? Which is with Winback, we had to build a whole tool around this. So we're leveraging AI to look at previous engagement history to identify what is the risk of sending to an individual user in the audience and what is the potential reward. But after that filtering and that modeling is done, what is the content that we need to send to that user? And how are we learning from every single send, not just what content is going to drive the highest engagement, but what is the type of profile that we actually should be targeting with this campaign? That we've built, like, this is the only thing that we do. So we hope that we're operating at like the best possible, like this is like an A+ version of this. It's all I do all day, every day. No lifecycle marketer is going to do that. It's not in their best interest to do that. There's so much more they could be doing with the active audience. The one sort of like, if you could just grab one golden nugget takeaway, it's look back at everything you've sent this person, like do some jumping jacks, shift your frame, right? And think like, what is the complete opposite? What's the scroll stopping moment that's actually not going to feel spammy, but garner, like really drive engagement so that I can signal to the ISP, this is an email that people want. And then hopefully I can get a percentage of these to actually break through to the primary box.
I like that. I threw the quote up down at the bottom here, kind of paraphrase what you were saying. But I like that a lot because it is true. Like, you're not just going to keep sending to them, and after like 9 months of not opening a single one of your emails or clicking anything, like there's not a headline or subject line that you're going to send that's going to do it. It's about fundamentally doing things differently. What about the like definition of the dormant segment? Like, if you were to give advice to a brand, how do they go about identifying those, defining them?
Sorry, say that again.
How would you go about like defining a dormant segment? Is it different for every brand, or is there like a?
It's a good question. So when people talk about win back, they're often talking about like this person purchased 90 days ago, 180 days ago, but then they're basing that off of like, what is their purchase cycle, right? So, you know, a snowboard brand would be different potentially than a coffee brand, right? Like their purchase cycles are going to be different. The audience that we're focused on is dormant, right? So these are people who were receiving emails, did not engage with those emails at all, and now they are in the risky bucket of sending to, right? So two different definitions of win back that can get misconstrued. You can have people who purchased 180 days ago, but have been engaging with your content and are just not ready in their purchase cycle. And you can have people who have completely stopped engaging with their content. And if you don't do something to reactivate them, they're going to be gone, or they're just not going to leverage that channel. They might buy through another channel, right? The way that Klaviyo defines this and all of their documentation, it says, do not email people who have not engaged with your emails, meaning have not opened, have not clicked, have not visited site in over 90 days. And then they even recommend going further if you're having deliverability issues down to 30 days. Most people, that is their cutoff, 90 days, but it depends on the brand. Like we have some brands where that definition is 200 days. And my general feedback on that is like, if you think that your cycle is 200 days, why has it taken 200 days for somebody to open one of your emails, right? Like, what is it about this next email that's going to be different than the last 199 days of emailing that this person has received? So in most cases, like it's defined by each brand, but typically when you break out this audience and you look at each email engagement history, like by definition, it's going to be crap. So typically the definition and the like industry understood definition is 90-day unengaged, which is defined by that is when generally risk increases. But I actually have like a big bone to pick with even that definition.
Do you find that brands are like precious and don't necessarily want to put people into this because the vanity metric of like list size is so important to them? And
yeah, but this is the thing, is like this audience is messing up all of your email metrics. So like a lifecycle marketer is being judged by like, what's my open rate, what's my click rate? Like I have a great way to increase your click rate. Email people who only engaged in the last 10 days, right? Like email people who only clicked on an email in the last 10 days. Wow, my click rate's amazing, right? So like this audience, if you're emailing them, they're bringing down your email metrics, and they're actually making it very difficult to make decisions about what is working and what isn't working. The larger sort of question of like list size, it is a bit of a vanity metric. And the way that I think about it is like your list size is not relevant. Your active audience list size is relevant.
Yeah. I was gonna say that there's like that I would love to see a high number on, but like just in general, having how many emails I have, like cool.
Well, that's like the whole like thesis of Winback, right? It's like, how do we take your inactives and increase the percentage of them that we can get back and be active? And in most cases, like we're not driving for a conversion. Like we think of these users as top of funnel. This is just like, in our view, this is better than Facebook, right? It's like this audience has already been filtered by Facebook. They've already clicked on the ad. They've already visited the website. They've already given their email. Maybe they've even purchased. They just stopped engaging with this channel. And if we can get them to re-engage, then we can get them to purchase at a higher rate than a holdout audience. Then there's incremental lift to be seen from the audience relative to just getting somebody completely new. But if you're comparing this to somebody who has been active in email in the last 30 days, like totally different side of the funnel, it actually should be treated in a totally different way.
So we have like the dormant segmentation. What about like advanced segmentation, like level 2, that you don't see as many lifecycle marketers implementing with their email program?
Like just across the board?
Yeah, I mean, things like recency, frequency, monetary value.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a tough question because it's like, it's such a rabbit hole. And it, like the way that I'd like to view these, when I was doing lifecycle consulting generally, I thought of things as levels, right? And so if a level 1 program had like particular characteristics, right? A level 2 program had particular characteristics, 3 program, et cetera. And oftentimes the issue that I saw was companies that were small adding too much complexity to their program in a way that made it impossible for them to run realistic A/B tests or even just like understand what was happening in the program itself. And so the recommendations that I typically have is like, have your flows set up, right? Have your audience segmented by prospects, by customers. And then once it starts getting, have it broken out by like your VIPs. But then where it starts getting very interesting is when you start doing like product-based segmentation. So this type of user typically buys this type of product. This type of user who bought this product, we want to upsell them on the next product. That is when like I would call like a level 4 program. And there's a number of clients that we have that are like at that level. And I look at it and I'm like, damn, this is wild. Like the way that their abandoned cart flows look like it's like a web, right? The person who's managing those programs is so dialed into every single element. But if you're not like ready for that level of sophistication, not even just in terms of like capability, but in terms of scale, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. And most of the times it's actually more important to revert back to just do the fundamentals as well as possible.
What are some like signals, whether it's like performance, revenue, list size, I don't know, seasonality? What are the things that determine which level you should be in?
It's usually just volume of sends. Like how quickly can you run an A/B test and get a statistically significant outcome for your primary flow, for your top revenue flows, right? So like say, for example, in your abandoned cart flow, you can have an abandoned cart flow 1, and you could be running, an A/B test on that at any time, right? At some point, you're going to get to a level of like, okay, we're pretty clear on what is the optimal experience for the general user, right? Then now you're saying, okay, I'm going to break out my prospective customers, the people who have never purchased, and my customers. and I'm going to try to beat the baseline for this segment with a different version of this test. And you need to come up with an idea that would give you the thought of like, this person should have a different experience, right? And then from there, it's like, maybe my VIP customers should get a totally different experience. Maybe that's more touch points, different send time, different subject lines, like just differentiated content. They should be pushing a different type of product based off of, we're a big fan of Taito, right? Taito has these like product journey analytics, right? So if user bought X, then show them Y, it'll increase their LTV by Z. So you need to have enough volume to be 100% sure that you are providing the best possible experience for the general user, so that then when you're testing into a smaller segment, you need to have the discipline to beat the general user to justify that new segment existing. Because now to run another test, you're actually like increasing the amount of work and time by a factor of 2.
I have a complete side wormhole we're doing down, but something you said really inspired me for it. So I used to be a media buyer. I'm not an email marketer. I can definitely get around a Klaviyo account, but like, I'm not thinking this high level as you are. As someone who's like so tapped into email from the software side, from the brand side, from the like decision maker side, do you think it's analogous to media buying in that it's in Facebook's best interest to simplify ad buying to the point that like anyone can come in, purchase ads, they perform well, and they reinvest based on their performance, and they stick around? Do you think that will happen to email, or the point where it's like, companies like Klaviyo, companies like SendLane are going to abstract a lot of this thinking out because their product does it for you, because it's in their interest, because it makes the performance of their customers better, ergo they stick around longer? Do you think that's what's going to happen? And if so, like, how are you hedging against that?
I'll give you an example of like, it's already happening. PostScript launched their infinite testing tool, which is specifically focused on SMS abandoned cart. And what it does is it perpetually tests different types of content, leveraging LLMs to produce that content within guardrails that the brand sets, right? So an abandoned cart SMS, instead of just doing like test A versus test B, you have AI that is perpetually testing new versions for until it hits the optimal version, and then it's always trying to beat that. That's the future. That's 100% like what's going to happen to email. And what does that mean for like the lifecycle marketer? I think it depends on like what those tools are structured as, right? Like, there's still a very important role for the lifecycle marketer inside of PostScript's tooling, right? But it's stuff that like only makes me more excited about the ecosystem. When we think about Winback, the stuff that we've been able to unlock with AI is far more exciting than like just running a basic email program like I grew up on in like MailChimp, right? There are so many like very challenging problems to solve when we're talking about first-party data. Like when we're talking about an email program, what we're really talking about is the free channel on top of all of your first-party data, right? It's the one customer relationship tool where you own your relationship with the customer. It's the only channel you don't have to pay to talk to them. That will always be important. And any tooling, any AI that allows you to make that experience feel more personal, not just feel more personal, but be more personal at scale, is something that is like incredibly important for the justification of any like storefront existing. And this is like a bit of my doomsday version of this, but it's like Amazon deal with TikTok Shop to like fully like keep the experience inside of the app. That is an example of like what happens to customer relationships when like data aggregators partner together to keep a user completely inside of their ecosystem and decrease friction to sale. But what are the products that end up winning in that environment, right? Products where a second purchase is actually irrelevant. It's just about what is the conversion off of a viral loop. Like, the answers to how you leverage your first party data to build an authentic relationship with your customer and keep them long term are the difference between the company existing in a world with For You pages and one-click checkout through aggregators, and a world where like your company thrives, right? And I do think that things are going to start going in this direction of just like crap products, like nailing it on these completely sort of these channels where you don't need to have a relationship with the brand to buy the product, and the products where the relationship with the brand is the reason why they exist. And the only way to leverage that is by utilizing those tools to make your experience with your experience with that user special.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of AI products on the market. I'm trying to figure out if there's a word for the distance between like the excitement over an AI tool and the actual performance of one. I feel like I get psyched about a tool every day and then I try it out. I'm like, oh, this is like so far from what roped me into this. Like, it feels like AI is really primed for this because a primitive, if I understand this correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a primitive email program, you're making very few decisions. You're just kind of lumping people into buckets arbitrarily with like fairly simple triggers and flows. Versus like a future state is you're making millions, if not billions, of decisions, right? Because you're trying to figure out like the value of each individual person instead of just like throwing them into a bucket and being like, yeah, they're probably going to come back if they're in that segment.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like a good read of like the future of AI in email, at least like with the targeting?
The things that I'm most excited about is I think deliverability is going to become a bigger and bigger component of email, right? It's like this year, like a lot of people are like, whatever year this is, 2024 is the year of deliverability. And it's like these updates to Gmail and Yahoo are serious and brands are, beginning to pay some attention, but a lot of it is just lip service, to be honest, right? They check the box and now they're moving on. AI is going to have a massive, in the cold email world, it's a very real thing. And you can see it in your inbox, like it's crap, right? And so the battle for the inbox is very much being impacted by AI, and the ISPs are going to have to answer to that battle with getting more stringent around deliverability. And so this is just the beginning of that. It's going to become more and more important over time. And a good email marketer is going to need to have tools that really improve their deliverability and allow them to expand their targetable audience and take advantage of all of their first party data. Then I believe in this like infinite testing loop. Like I do think that is the future. And that is not just like, that is like a lot of the AI tools are nice parlor tricks. But in terms of like the things that I'm most interested in, it's like, what is something that a human literally could not do without tooling, as opposed to what is something that saves a human time? And running like an infinite amount of tests to identify what is the optimal version for a user. Like there's no version of it. There's no email marketer in the world who can actually do that.
I like this rebrand of deliverability because honestly, before this call, I thought of deliverability as almost like the technical SEO guy, where everyone's like, I don't know, like guy or gal is over there doing a bunch of weird stuff, breaking rules or doing gray hat stuff to make sure, but it's not. It's actually like a lot more exciting, and I don't think it's been painted like that previously.
It's it's like why I chose to go super deep in this space. It's like the way I put it is like there's email nerds, which is like a very special nerd that I love. And then there's like the deliverability nerds, and it's just a whole different level of like, dude, I mean, I say I'm even like half decent. Like there are people who the level of technical that you need to be to understand every single thing that happens to an email between when it is sent and when it arrives in the inbox, and understanding like how these algorithms work. Like there are people who are so much better at this than I am. And the issue is that they work at like Disney, and like they're working for major enterprise companies that are sending millions and millions of emails or billions of emails.
But you get my comparison though, right? Like I feel like with your website, you had like that's the technical SEO person, and they just basically are like a webmaster, and no one knows what they're doing. They like peruse some weird technical blogs, or like they follow one person at Google who drops like some secret tweet that like will let them know about an update coming, or like how that affects them. Like, we all pretend like they're doing black magic.
Yeah.
But it now sounds like even the nerds you're talking about, they're not like on a separate island. Like they are strategists. They should be in the room.
Yeah, like they're sort of deliverability people in like the cold email space, and that's very gray hat. It's like I'm not down with it in general, right? The deliverability experts in the B2C space are like compliance people. Like they're irreverent to compliance. And if you go into the channel and you're like, hey, how do I like do something sketch? They're just going to be like, you don't do it, right? Like, because they're the people who get brought in to fix the massive problems that happen at enterprise businesses that like people just walked into, right? And in order to fix the problems once they've become so bad, you need to like know the person at Gmail and make a direct request. Like I could go into days of like how bad this stuff can get. And that's why, like for a small to medium-sized brand, it's like the way that we view it is this is a risky asset. Either don't touch it or work with an expert who has a set of tools that make it safe to target if you want to maximize revenue from the audience. But yeah, in general, it's like, it's actually not so in the B2C space. It's less like gray hatty and more like compliancy. And the issue is that companies don't listen to these compliance people telling them what not to do until they have a problem. And most brands don't have the money or time to deal with a big deliverability issue. And most brands don't even recognize that they're already in a deliverability issue. They're just inboxing at 70% instead of 90%. So yeah, it ends up being it feels a bit black boxy because it is so technical.
Another question here. Any recommended inbox deliverability tools or partners to look at?
Yeah, so there's one is like Klaviyo has deliverability analytics, but like it's super basic. They give you like a deliverability score. It's like your aggregated click rates, open rates. It's like decent. But like at a baseline, like if your DMARC isn't set up, you need to set up your DMARC, and you need to be like reading those reports that are coming back. You need to be Google Postmaster tools. It's like should be checked very regularly. And one caveat on this is like your Klaviyo spam complaint rates are not reflective of your Google Postmaster spam complaints rate. It's not. You need to be looking at both. And so those are just sort of like the free tools. There's a tool called GlockX. There's another tool called Mail Monitor. Mail Monitor is one of our partners. And they do seed list testing, and they do like your DMARC, DKIM, SPF reporting. Instead of that just being a like standard report that's sent from the ISPs that's basically unreadable, they structure it in a way where you can understand it and make decisions off of it. I mean, obviously Winback, I think, is the best tool. What we do is we layer in deliverability monitoring and servicing into what we do. So we're basically like solving the deliverability problem while also maximizing revenue from the dormant audience. There's a tool, there's Zero Bounce Kickbox for email validation. We have a tool that we think outperforms those that we bake into what we do. There's a tool called Orita, which is their sort of structure is like we save you money on your Klaviyo bill by identifying like duplicates, like the toxic emails, the emails that you're not using are never going to use, and they remove those from your account. That's another great tool. We have something that's similar, but we also stack really well on top of them. And it's a really, really smart, really good team over there. Outside of that, those are the tools. Like you need something for monitoring, you need something for filtering. And then once you have those, you need like understanding how to leverage those and when to put risk on, when to take risk off. That's like a bit of the learning base. It just requires reps.
Yeah, we're partnered with Orita as well, so definitely check out Winback, definitely check out Orita. A follow-up question here: what about auth tools for email validation like Clerk and Auth.io? What are your thoughts on those?
I don't have much of an opinion on those. I haven't done much specifically on Clerk or Auth, so I can't really speak to it.
So I had questions. We talked a lot about like targeting and deliverability, but to jump back and pull a thread like similar to the analogy to paid media and media buying, I want to talk about the creative a little bit. So like the actual emails. What can you tell us about like email campaign strategies, or specifically around like personalization or dynamic content?
What do you mean, like what could work, or?
Yeah, like what are some campaign strategies that you think you can share with brands that are tuning in?
Yeah, it's a tough. Like the best version of personalization that actually works is product recommendation. And so like the ability to pull in, like understand what is the product that a user is going to interact with and be able to target them with that product works very well. And that's like why your abandoned browse works well. That's why your abandoned cart works well. And like the level of intent that user has is like more so around like what is the product that the user is already interested in, how can you continue to like allow email to follow them with that product. And then the next layer up from that is like based off the products that they previously bought, what is the product that they're most likely to engage with. Something like very tactical that we've found though is pushing users to individual product pages does not perform as well as shifting them to a product listing page. So a strategy that I like is building custom product listing pages with the top 3 products that this user is most likely to engage with. And Taito does a really good job of building out those types of pages for users. Another one that I've talked to like Super Affiliate about is identifying like if a user came in through a particular affiliate, instead of driving that user to your like product homepage, drive them to the Super Affiliate page associated with the influencer that got them excited about the brand, right? Particularly things that I'm interested in are how can you leverage personalization to increase conversion rate after the click and increase click rate after the open. Before the open, open's like an unreliable metric in the world that we live in now. But also like subject line personalization, it's kind of, sure, great. It's not that cool.
Before we go on to this question, which is also a really, really good one, my novice understanding of email, I know there's been a lot of like policy changes, both by ISPs, but also by companies like Apple, right? That's one of the reasons why you have inflated open rates. Does that mean that open rate is like an unreliable thing to bake into your engagement or unengaged segments as like a filter?
Yes. I mean, so you can filter iOS, Apple privacy opens. So this is an issue that a lot of brands have, is that they're including in, let's say they do like has not don't target anybody who has not opened an email in over 90 days. They're not filtering Apple machine opens from that audience, which means that there is a large percentage of their list that they are just continually emailing forever and have no indication that this person actually engaged. It is an issue though, because that is a large portion of the list, right? And if you're only relying on clicks as like an engagement metric, your list start targeting is going to be very small. And so that's where it's like, it's very helpful to get nuanced in how you're structuring your, like the definition of your dormant audiences. And it's something that like we go very deep into when we're working with a brand.
Danilo's question is, if your emails are going to spam, is that captured in the postmaster spam complaint rate? Or are spam complaints just when people manually mark your email as spam?
So it's postmasters is user reported spam complaints.
There you go. Really easy, really quick answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, something interesting to me is like when we talk about like how big is a brand before they have someone that's like full-time dealing with deliverability, or is that
like most don't? Most don't. Full-time like focus on deliverability, like
yeah.
Like Fortune 500.
And I don't know how close you've gotten with different agencies. How would you grade like most agencies with their actual deliverability knowledge? Because I feel like there's like such a massive cottage industry of email marketing agencies.
I think I like 0. There are 2 deliverability agencies specifically that do deliverability that are absolutely amazing. And when you see what those agencies do, you recognize that nobody knows what they're talking about.
So even if I'm like a brand and I'm using like one of those, typical agencies that found me on Twitter is asking me to spend $3,000 to $5,000 a month to set up all my flows and send campaigns, you think that those people are completely absent on average?
Yeah, like they probably in most instances they know as much, if not less, than just like a typical lifecycle marketer as it relates to deliverability. And I don't say this to be like offensive. It's just not, there's so much to do inside of a lifecycle program that deeply understanding deliverability is just not an issue that people typically deal with, right? In the same way that I was like one of the top lifecycle marketers before I started this company. And when that CEO was pressing me on like, okay, but break it down even further, I got to a point where I was like, you know what, I actually don't understand this stuff as well as I probably should, right? And that is part of the issue, is like, it's not a problem until it's a problem. Outside of that, I am just going to follow best practices and do what everybody else is saying. And to be honest, that is probably the right answer for most companies, right? It is like, you need to be sending out your campaigns. You need to be setting up your flows. You need to be A/B testing those flows. You need to be putting reports together for these other teams. Like there's a million things that you have to do. You can't be an expert in every corner of the internet. These life cycle agencies, like there's not that many people out there who know a lot about deliverability, and I kind of know all of them, and they don't work at those agencies.
This seems to be a very big issue in the sense of like the number of businesses out there that are doing this incorrectly is significant. Let's say more than 2/3 of them. Ballpark, we're saying like 70% of people's lists are unengaged. Is this like 80% of Americans are vitamin D deprived, or is this like we're asleep at the wheel? Like what is the severity of this issue? Like what's gonna happen if people don't fix it?
I mean, I can say Winback doesn't work for every brand, right? But it works for most. And we have brands that we've produced over $1 million in incremental lift for in 4 months. So the opportunity is definitely there, right? When we're talking about the dormant audience, like an exercise that anybody can do is they can take your dormant audience, as whatever that definition is for you, and do a cross-check in Shopify to see what percentage of revenue that audience, what percentage of your total revenue is attributed to that audience. And for most brands, what you'll find is it's actually close to 20% of this year's revenue, right? Like, these are not, just because they're unengaged with emails does not mean they're not an important audience. It just means that you need to be very sophisticated in how you are re-engaging them on email. And the strategy of like, just wait and sit until Black Friday and then hit them with the lowest margin offer that we have all year, like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's both like the least profitable, the highest risk, and you're leaving a bunch of money on the table waiting for that final day to come around. So yeah, there's a ton of money in the list, but there is also a ton of risk. And unless the brand, in most instances, is in the brand's best interest not to be aggressive with that audience, unless they have the deliverability monitoring tooling, unless they're being sophisticated in their targeting, unless they're leveraging filtering, not just like the zero bounces of the world, but what we're doing on the Winback side. And I hate to position ourselves in like, we're the only one, but we're the only ones who have the tooling to really target this audience in a intelligent way. And we, even with that, we have to layer specialists on top of it to be able to do it safely. So there's a bunch of opportunity there, but it is one of the hardest parts of an email program.
And I know we're coming up almost on time here, but you've spoken to some results that you've managed to get for customers. What's like the framework they use for measuring success here? Like, what models you're using, what KPIs you're tracking? Like, what's for everyone listening, if they were to go do this with Winback, without Winback, yeah, what are they looking to monitor?
Yeah, this is critical. So do not, if you're going to do a reactivation program, do not base the performance off of a multi-model mix or like last click attribution. This audience needs to be treated like top of funnel. They're going to require multiple touch points. And in the best case scenario, they should be converting off of abandoned cart or abandoned browse flows. So what'll end up happening is you'll be taking credit for revenue that was actually attributed to another program, another platform, right? Or that platform will be taking credit for a revenue that was driven by this program. The only way to truly know is to do a randomized control group. So within Klaviyo, just to start, make it super simple, 50-50 split. You're not touching this audience anyway. You know, you're running all of your filters, you're doing all the stuff that we do in Winback. I really don't recommend doing this without the tooling, and this is dangerous territory if you're just kind of going on it on your own. But if you're looking to do this and measure your lift, take a 50-50 split, randomized split, and just monitor that audience for like a month. Don't do anything. You should see that revenue total orders are equal for both. Take group A, send them your Winback flow or your Winback campaign, whatever that targeting is, and then monitoring them for a month, 45 days, see what the revenue is for group A compared to group B. The difference between those, that's your incremental lift. And then you take that model, you bring it to your boss and you say, we'd like to work with Winback to do this.
That's awesome. We're almost out of time here. Where can people find you, find Winback? What's the best way to work with you guys?
The easiest way is actually LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a DM, or our website, it's winback.pro. And you can sign up there and just reference that it came through this live stream.
Well, awesome, man. This was a great chat. I learned a lot. I feel like now deliverability experts, I see them on equal weighting with like campaign strategists. At least if I was to make like a perfect small email team, they would have a seat at the table and they wouldn't be this like relegated to the laboratory team that I previously thought of them. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sending a bunch of brands your way, because I think if those numbers are true, I think our entire customer base could benefit by reaching out to you and seeing if they can re-engage their lists.
Awesome. Same to you guys. I love
Awesome.
what Platter's doing. The amount of companies that have reached out to me and they're like, I need somebody who can do CRO. Our site's like too complicated. It's moving slow. Everybody's charging me like an arm and a leg. Why do I need all these tools? Like, you guys nailed the problem that I see in so many different areas. It literally doesn't need to be rocket science. And it's very cool what you guys are doing.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. And then this question from Molly is, will this session playback be saved, posted somewhere? Yes. So everyone who RSVP'd, I'm going to be dropping this into your inbox. You'll hear from Dean and I, and then hopefully it'll be posted on YouTube in a couple days as well. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks everybody. Speak soon.
All right, bye.